If you looked at my life from the outside, you would think it was perfect. You would think I had everything a person could want. I had a beautiful, large house on a very quiet street. I had a husband, and he was very successful. My life looked like a dream. It was the kind of life that many people wished they had, but that was only what you could see from the outside. Inside the walls of my perfect house, things were very different. Inside, I felt like I was slowly disappearing. It felt like I was becoming smaller and smaller every single day. I am 46 years old. At this age, I believed my life story was already finished. I thought the words were all written down and the ink was dry. I believed the book of my life was closed and could not be changed. But I was very, very wrong. My true life did not really begin until 2 young men came to live with us. One was my husband's son from his first marriage, and the other was my husband's nephew. They moved into our quiet, empty house. When they arrived, they woke up a part of me that I was sure was gone forever. It was a part of me that I truly believed had died a long, long time ago. I need to tell you something important about my husband, Henry. He is a good man. He is not a mean person or a cruel person. He never says unkind things to me. The problem is not that he is bad. The problem is that he is not there. He is absent. His work is not just a job for him. His work is his whole world. It is like a different life that gets all of his attention. It gets all of his time, all of his energy, and all of his passion. There was nothing left for me. He built a beautiful world for me. Our house was large and expensive. It looked perfect. He gave me money so I never had to worry about bills. He gave me a high social status, so people respected us. It was like he built a beautiful golden cage for me. It was pretty to look at, but it was still a cage. After he built it, he just forgot that I was living inside it. He was busy with his work, and I was alone in the beautiful house. We were not sharing a life together. We were living next to each other, but we were not together. Our lives were like 2 train tracks. They run side by side for miles and miles, but they never, ever meet. They never touch. The silence in our big house was a real thing. It was not just the absence of sound. It was a feeling. It was a presence. You could feel the silence in every room. You could feel it in the living room, on the big, comfortable sofa. The pillows on the sofa were always perfectly soft and clean, but no one ever sat on them. We never sat together to watch a movie or to talk. The sofa was just for looking at, like a picture in a magazine. It was beautiful and empty. You could feel the silence in the kitchen. It was a big kitchen with shiny counters and expensive appliances. I cooked in that kitchen. I would try new recipes and make nice meals, but most of the time, I cooked only for myself. I would set the beautiful dining room table with 2 plates, 2 forks, and 2 knives, hoping Henry would come home. But he usually called late to say he was stuck at the office, so I would eat alone at a big table meant for a family. The food tasted lonely. The silence was my dinner guest. You could feel the silence in our bedroom at night. The bed was very big, a king-sized bed, but it felt vast and empty. Henry would often come to bed very late, long after I was asleep. Or sometimes he slept in the guest room, so he would not wake me when he got up early for a call. There was a huge, empty space in the bed next to me every single night. For many, many years, that silence was the loudest thing in my life. It screamed at me. My days were all the same. It was a routine that never changed. I would wake up early. I would make a cup of coffee and drink it alone in the quiet kitchen. Then I would go outside to my garden. The garden was my only escape. I would work there for hours. After the garden, I would manage the house. I made sure everything was clean and perfect. I would plan a dinner that Henry would probably not come home for, and then the evening would come, and there was just quiet. So much quiet. It was a heavy, sad quiet. Of course, I had friends. I was not completely alone in the world. I had friends who were wives of Henry's colleagues. We would go out for lunch at nice restaurants. We would drink white wine and talk. But our conversations were always about the same things. We talked about our children, who were now grown up and had their own lives. We talked about our husbands' business trips to other countries. We talked about the new house being built down the street. It was all talk about things on the surface. It was never about our real feelings. I never felt like I could be honest with them. I never felt I could tell them the truth. How could I say, I am so lonely that it hurts? How could I explain that I felt achingly, deeply lonely, even when I was sitting in a restaurant full of people, laughing and talking with my friends? How do you start to explain that you feel like you are a ghost in your own life? That the walls of your own house don't know you are there? That you feel invisible? How do you tell someone that the only person you really talk to is yourself? I had tried to talk to Henry in the beginning, but when I would try to share my feelings, he would just give a polite nod. He would be looking at his phone or thinking about work. He was there, but he was not listening. So I learned to stop talking. It was easier to be quiet. I was not a real person anymore. I felt like a piece of the furniture. I was like a beautiful lamp or an expensive painting on the wall. I was functional. I managed the house. I was nice to look at when we had to go to social events. But in the end, I was an object. I was not Ava. I was Ava, Henry's wife. That was my only identity. The real Ava was gone. The Ava who used to love rock music and play it so loud the windows would shake. The Ava who used to have a small art studio and would splatter paint on big canvases. Her paintings were messy and full of bright, vibrant colors. They were full of life. That Ava was also the girl who dreamed of traveling, not to fancy resorts where everything was safe and clean, but to real places, messy places, places full of adventure. That Ava, the real me, was packed away. She was in a dusty old box in the attic of my mind, and I had not opened that box in a very long time. When you get to be 46 years old, you start to believe that this is just how life is. You start to accept it. This is the path you chose. You make a kind of peace with the sadness. It becomes a quiet, low-grade ache that is always there. You get used to the feeling of being completely and totally unseen by the person who is supposed to see you more than anyone else. You learn that it is much easier to push your own feelings down than to show them to someone who will just ignore them. You start to lie to yourself. You tell yourself that this comfortable numbness you feel is actually happiness. You tell yourself that you are lucky to have such a beautiful house and a successful husband. And in many ways, I was lucky. I knew that, but I was also suffocating. I was in a beautiful cage, and I did not even realize that I was slowly, quietly running out of air. My entire world changed on a normal Tuesday. It was not a big, dramatic event. There was no explosion. It was just a phone call. It was a simple, ordinary phone call that changed everything. Henry was in Singapore for work. His phone calls were usually very quick and to the point. They were check-ins. "Hello, Ava. Everything okay? Good. I have a meeting. Talk to you tomorrow." This call started just like all the others. "Ava," he said. His voice sounded clear, but it also sounded like it was a million miles away. It always sounded distant. "Something has come up. There's been a change of plans." My mind immediately went to his business. "Is the deal okay?" I asked. "The deal is fine," he said quickly. "It's about Jason. His summer housing arrangement fell through. He needs a place to stay." Jason, Henry's son. He was from Henry's first marriage to a woman who had passed away years ago. Jason was a quiet, serious young man. He was 22 years old. I had only met him a few times at holidays or family events. He was always polite but distant. My mind started to race. My quiet house, my silent, orderly world. Jason, living here? The idea felt like a stone dropping into a still, quiet pond. "Oh," I said, trying to sound calm. "You mean here, with us?" "Yes, here," Henry said. "It would only be for a couple of months, until he goes back to college in the fall. And there's one more thing. His cousin, Adam, is with him, my sister's son. They're traveling together for the summer. He needs a place to stay, too. It would be a huge help to my sister and to me if you could do this." He was not asking me if it was okay. He was telling me. The decision was already made. He had made it alone, from the other side of the world. But that was how our marriage worked. He was the CEO who made the big decisions. I was the home manager who carried them out. There was no point in arguing. It would have been a waste of breath. He would have just said, "Ava, it's already done. They're on their way." So I just said the words I always said. "Okay, Henry, of course." A week later, they arrived. I stood at my front door, the door I had cleaned just that morning, and watched them get out of a taxi. They had two huge, heavy duffel bags. They looked completely different from each other. They were like night and day. Jason was tall and thin, with the same serious eyes as his father. But when he looked at me, he had a much softer, gentler smile. He walked up the steps and said in a quiet voice, "Hello, Ava. Thank you for this." You could tell just by looking at him that he was an old soul. He was calm and still. And then there was Adam. Adam was the opposite of calm and still. He was pure energy. He was chaotic and bright. He had a head full of wild, curly brown hair that bounced when he moved. He had a huge grin that seemed to light up his whole face, and a kind of confidence that just poured off him. He bounded up the steps after Jason. "Ava, it is so great to see you. This place is incredible. Thank you so much for letting us crash here," he said, all in one long, fast breath. His eyes were already looking everywhere, taking in the house, the garden, everything. I gave them a small, polite smile and led them inside. As I showed them to the guest rooms upstairs, the house already felt completely different. The silence was broken. It was louder. Their footsteps were heavy on the stairs. The doors clicked shut with more force than I was used to. I could hear their muffled voices echoing down the hallway as they put their bags down. My quiet, clean, perfect sanctuary had been invaded, and I am ashamed to admit it. But the first feeling I had was not kindness or generosity. It was resentment. I was angry that my routine was being disturbed. I just wanted my silence back. I wanted my empty house back. I had no idea at that moment that the silence I loved so much was the very thing that was slowly, painfully killing me. That first week was very awkward. We were like three strangers living in a hotel, not a home. We tried very hard not to get in each other's way. Our house was big, so it was easy to avoid each other. In the mornings, I would get up first, as always. I would make a large pot of coffee. I would pour myself a cup, and then I would leave 2 clean mugs out on the counter next to the pot. I would go into my garden, my safe place. A few hours later, when I came back inside, the mugs would be in the sink, washed and clean. They would murmur a quiet, "Thanks for the coffee," if we passed in the hallway. I would nod and give a small smile. Then I would retreat back to my garden or to another part of the house. We were not a family. We were just Henry's boys and Henry's wife. The first small change, the first crack in the thick ice between us, happened about 10 days after they arrived. It was a very hot afternoon. The sun was strong and the air was heavy. I was in the garden, on my knees in the cool dirt. My hands were covered in soil. I was repotting some lavender plants, moving them to a sunnier spot. Working in the garden was one of the only things that made me feel real, that made me feel grounded. I was completely focused on my task. I was lost in the moment, thinking only about the plants and the earth. "Those smell amazing." The voice startled me. I jumped and looked up. It was Jason. I had not heard him approach at all. He was just standing there on the grass a few feet away. His hands were in his pockets, and he was watching me work. "Oh, thank you," I said. I felt suddenly strange and self-conscious, like he had caught me doing something private. "It's lavender." "I know," he said, and he gave me that small, shy smile. "My mom used to grow it. She said it helps calm the mind." He looked around at the flower beds, at the neat rows of vegetables, at the climbing roses on the wall. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Your garden is beautiful. You must spend a lot of time out here." It was such a simple sentence. They were just a few simple words, but they hit me with a surprising force. It felt heavy in a good way. He didn't just see a pretty garden. He saw the work behind it. He saw the hours and hours I poured into this little piece of land. He saw the effort. In that moment, he saw a piece of me. It was a feeling so new and strange that I almost didn't recognize it. It was the feeling of being seen, really seen. The second crack in the ice was much, much louder, and it came from Adam. It happened one evening a few days later. I was in the kitchen going through my usual routine. I was making salmon with steamed vegetables. It was healthy. It was sensible. And it was completely, totally boring. Adam bounced into the kitchen like he always did, full of energy. His phone was in his hand and it was blasting music. It was some indie rock band I had never heard of before. The sound was so joyful and messy and loud. It filled my quiet, sterile kitchen. It felt like a violation of my rules, but it also felt like a breath of fresh air. It was a relief. "What you making, Ava?" he asked. He leaned over my shoulder to look in the pan. "Ooh, salmon. Very classy." He grinned his big, wide grin. "You know what would be 1,000,000 times better than this?" he said, pointing at my sad piece of fish. "Burgers. Big, juicy burgers. On the grill. It is a crime not to use the grill on a beautiful night like this." My mind immediately went into defense mode. I started to protest. It was a weeknight. The grill was not clean. We didn't have any ground beef. We didn't have any burger buns. My list of excuses was a mile long. This was not part of the plan. This was not part of my routine. He just waved his hand and dismissed all of my excuses. Nonsense, he said with a laugh. Those are not real problems. I'll do a quick run to the grocery store. Jason can clean the grill. He's not doing anything. And you, he said, pointing at me, you can make your famous what's a good side dish you make? A famous salad? He had no idea if I made anything famous. I didn't make anything famous, but he just assumed I did. He assumed I was a person with skills and specialties. It was charming. An hour later, my quiet, orderly evening was completely transformed. We were all on the back patio. The air didn't smell like lemon and fish anymore. It smelled like charcoal and grilling onions. Adam was at the grill, flipping burgers and telling a long, ridiculous story about a road trip he took with his friends. He was acting out all the different parts and doing funny voices. Jason was leaning back in his chair, laughing. It was a low, rumbling sound, a sound of pure happiness. It was a sound I had never heard in this house before. And I was laughing. I wasn't doing my usual polite small titter that I used at Henry's work parties. I was laughing a real, deep, belly laugh. The kind of laugh that makes your stomach hurt and your eyes water. We ate burgers on paper plates. It was messy. There was ketchup on the table. It was not my usual perfect, clean dinner. For the first time in more than 10 years, my big, silent house actually sounded like a home. It wasn't quiet, it wasn't orderly. It was loud and messy and so full of life. And as I sat there, listening to their laughter, I could feel a slow thaw starting in the coldest, most frozen part of my heart. As the summer days grew longer and warmer, something inside of me started to change, too. It was like a flower that had been closed up for a long time, slowly starting to unfold its petals. The awkwardness between the three of us just melted away. It disappeared. In its place, a new feeling grew. It was an easy, comfortable rhythm. We found a way to live together that felt natural and good. In their own different ways, Jason and Adam started pulling me out of the pale beige watercolor painting that was my life, and they pulled me into a new world, a world full of bright, strong colors. The evenings became my favorite part of the day. The sun would start to go down and the air would cool off. We would sit out on the patio furniture, the furniture that Henry and I never used. We would watch the sky turn from blue to orange and pink, and we would just talk. At first, the conversations were mostly about them. They told me about their college classes, their friends, their dreams for the future. But soon, they started to ask questions about me. They were not asking about Ava, Henry's wife. They were curious about Ava, just Ava. Adam was usually the one who started the deeper conversations. He was endlessly curious. "So, Ava, what did you study in college?" he asked one night. "Before you met Henry, what did you want to be when you grew up?" He would lean forward, his chin resting in his hands, and he would look at me with genuine interest. He really wanted to know the answer. And to my own surprise, I found myself telling them. I told them about my art degree. I told them about the tiny, cluttered studio apartment I used to rent. It was a messy place, but I loved it. It always smelled like turpentine and oil paint. I told them that my biggest dream was to have my own art show, to see my paintings hanging on the clean white walls of a gallery. I wanted people to look at my work and feel something. As I was telling them these stories, it felt like I was talking about a different person. It felt like I was describing a girl I used to know a long, long time ago. A girl I had almost forgotten. "Why did you stop painting?" Jason asked one evening. His questions were always simpler than Adam's, but somehow they cut right through everything and went straight to the bone. He wasn't just being curious, he was trying to understand me. I just shrugged my shoulders. I gave him the same excuses I had been telling myself for 20 years. "Oh, I said, trying to sound casual. "Life happened. I got married. We moved for Henry's job. Then I was helping to raise Henry's daughter from his first marriage. There just was never any time for painting. It was a hobby, and I had more important things to do." Jason just looked at me with those old soul eyes of his. He was so quiet and observant. He said, "You can make time." He didn't say it like a command. He said it like it was the simplest, most obvious fact in the entire world. His quiet attention was a gift. It was a kind of validation I didn't even know I needed. When I was with Jason, I didn't feel like I had to perform or pretend to be happy. I just had to be. And for the first time in so long, I started to feel less like a ghost and more like a real, solid person. I felt seen. And if Jason made me feel seen, Adam made me feel heard. He loved to talk and debate. He would draw out my opinions on everything. We talked about movies we had watched, books we had read, and even politics. He would argue with me and he would tease me, but he would always listen to my answers. He listened like what I had to say was important. He listened like my opinion mattered. For so many years, my thoughts and opinions had just bounced around inside my own head with nowhere to go. There was no one to share them with. With Adam, my mind felt like it was waking up from a long, deep sleep. It was stretching its muscles and coming back to life. He made me feel sharp. He made me feel witty and funny. He made me feel young again. One rainy afternoon, he was exploring the basement looking for a board game. "No way!" he yelled up the stairs. His voice echoed through the house. "Ava, you have all these old records. Led Zeppelin, The Clash, the Ramones. I thought you only listened to, smooth jazz or something." That night, we didn't sit on the perfect sofa. We sat on the living room floor and he made me pull out my favorite albums from when I was a teenager. As the raw, powerful sound of a guitar riff I hadn't heard in 20 years filled that huge, silent room, something inside of me just broke free. The music was loud and alive, and I felt loud and alive. I told them stories about going to concerts when I was young, about the feeling of the bass vibrating through the floor and up into your bones. I was smiling a real smile, just remembering who I used to be. And as I sat there on the floor, looking at their two young faces, one so calm and gentle, the other so full of chaotic life, a terrifying thought suddenly hit me. The thought was so clear and strong, it was like a bell ringing in my head. I am happier right now, in this moment, than I have been in 15 years. The thought was so wonderful and so awful at the same time. It was immediately followed by a huge wave of guilt. This wasn't my real life. This was a temporary situation. They were not my sons. They were just visiting. This joy that I was feeling, it felt borrowed. It didn't feel like it belonged to me. Was it wrong? Was it wrong to feel this alive and this happy in my own home for reasons that had absolutely nothing to do with my husband? The night the storm inside me finally broke, the air outside was warm and heavy with humidity. It was the kind of night where you can feel the rain coming long before it starts. Henry was in London for 2 weeks on another business trip. Before the boys came, his absence just meant the usual, familiar, dull loneliness. But now, his absence felt different. It felt like freedom. It felt like space to breathe. Adam, of course, had insisted on another barbecue. He said it was the only proper way to spend a warm summer evening. So we did. We grilled chicken and corn on the cob. Now, after dinner, we were sitting in chairs around the small fire pit on the patio. The flames were dancing, casting a warm, flickering light on our faces. We were full and relaxed. The wine I had with dinner had lowered all of my usual defenses. My walls were down. It was Adam who broke the comfortable silence. He was looking at me. His usual playful, teasing grin was gone. It was replaced by something much more serious. "Are you happy, Ava?" he asked. His voice was soft, much quieter than usual. The question was so simple, just 4 little words, but it landed in my heart like an earthquake. It shook my entire world. No one had asked me that question in years. Not Henry, not my friends. I hadn't even dared to ask myself that question. I was too terrified of the answer. Tears immediately pricked the corners of my eyes. They came out of nowhere. I tried to swallow them down. I tried to think of a polite, normal answer. Something like, "Of course I'm happy. I have a wonderful life." But I couldn't say the words. I couldn't lie anymore. The dam that I had spent 20 years building inside of me, the strong wall that held back all the loneliness, all the disappointment, all the quiet sadness, it just crumbled into dust. "No," I whispered. The word was so quiet I could barely hear it myself. And then, once that one word was out, everything else came pouring out after it. I couldn't stop it. I told them everything. I told them about feeling like a ghost in my own beautiful house. I told them about the crushing, heavy silence that was my only companion. I told them about packing away my own dreams and my own personality until I forgot who I even was anymore. I told them that I had given up. I had resigned myself to living a life that was only half lived. "And then," I said, and now my voice was breaking and the tears were streaming down my face, "and then you two showed up. You just came here, and you turned all the lights on in my dark house. You see me. You really, truly see me. You hear me. You talk to me like I'm a real person, not just a part of the furniture. In just 2 months, you have made me feel more like myself than I have felt in my entire marriage." I finally stopped talking. I was out of breath and completely mortified. What had I done? I had just laid my pathetic, lonely, broken heart bare for my husband's son and his nephew to see. I felt so ashamed. I braced myself for the awkward silence that was sure to come. I expected them to look at each other, make an excuse about being tired, and quickly leave me alone with my mess. But they didn't move. They didn't leave. Jason leaned forward and reached out his hand. He placed it gently on my arm. It wasn't a romantic gesture. It was an anchor. It was just pure, simple, human comfort. Adam just sat there and watched me, his eyes full of a profound empathy that I never knew he had. He wasn't the chaotic kid anymore. He was a kind man. "We were adrift too, Ava," Jason said quietly. His voice was a soft comfort in the dark. "After my mom died and with Dad always being well, you know how he is. I didn't really have a home. It didn't feel like I belonged anywhere. and Adam has been bouncing around for a while." Adam nodded, staring into the fire. "This was just supposed to be a place to crash for the summer," he said, his voice low. "A roof over our heads. But you did more than that. You made it feel like a home. You took care of us. You cooked for us. You listened to my stupid stories. You made us feel seen, too." He looked up from the fire and met my eyes. His own eyes were shining in the firelight. "You didn't just wake yourself up, Ava. I think you kind of saved us, too." In that moment, under the dark sky, just as the first few drops of rain started to fall, our three lonely souls found a strange and beautiful harbor in each other. It wasn't about romance or desire. It was something deeper than that. It was a connection forged in shared loneliness and a desperate human need to be truly seen by another person. It was a lifeline. And sitting there between those two kind young men, I didn't feel broken or pathetic anymore. I felt reborn. I woke up the next morning feeling light. That is the only word for it. The storm from the night before had passed, and the air outside smelled clean and fresh. For the first time that I can remember, the air inside my own head felt that way too. The heavy fog of shame that I was expecting to feel when I woke up was just gone. It wasn't there. In its place, there was a quiet, humming clarity, a sense of knowing. When I went downstairs, the boys were already in the kitchen. The house was usually quiet in the mornings, but not today. Music was playing softly from a small speaker. The smell of coffee was already in the air. Adam was at the stove, attempting to make pancakes. He had a cookbook open, and there was a fine layer of flour covering the counter, the floor, and parts of his shirt. It was a happy mess. Jason was sitting at the kitchen table reading a book. He looked up as I walked in. He didn't say anything. He just gave me a small, knowing smile. There was no awkwardness. There was no embarrassment. Nothing needed to be said about the night before. We had all walked through a door together last night, and now we were in a new room, a place of deep, comfortable understanding. That one single look from Jason held more communication, more empathy, and more connection than Henry and I had shared in years. Later that day, I did something I hadn't done in 20 years. I did something for myself. I went down into the dark, musty basement. I found the dusty, forgotten box with the words, "Art supplies," written on the side in faded marker. I carried it upstairs into the spare bedroom that got the best morning light. I placed the box on the floor and opened it. I unpacked the old, dried-up tubes of paint. I found my brushes, their bristles stiff and hard from years of not being used. I found a stack of old canvases that had turned yellow with age. I went and got my old record player. I put on a Led Zeppelin album, and I turned the volume up loud. And then I started to paint. It was a total mess at first. My hands felt clumsy and unsure. My eye for color was rusty. The first painting was terrible, but it didn't matter. It didn't matter at all. With every messy, clumsy, imperfect brushstroke, I felt a piece of the real Ava coming back to life. I could feel her in my fingertips. I wasn't painting for a gallery. I wasn't painting to impress anyone. I wasn't painting for Henry. I was painting for me. I was reclaiming a piece of my own soul. The last few weeks of that amazing summer passed by in a blur of vibrant, colorful life. We filled that big, quiet house with noise. We filled it with music. We filled it with loud laughter. We filled it with the delicious smells of new recipes we tried together. We took a day trip to the coast and walked on the beach, eating ice cream. We stayed up late watching old black and white movies that Adam had never seen. I felt a sense of ownership over my own life and my own happiness that was both incredible and terrifying at the same time. Because there was always a shadow in the back of my mind, even on the sunniest days. The pages of the calendar kept turning. August was coming to an end, summer was ending, and Henry was coming home. I had found this new person inside of me, this more alive version of myself. But where did this new Ava fit into her old life? The question was a tight, hard knot of fear in my stomach. I had been woken up, but I was waking up into a world that I no longer recognized, into a life that no longer fit me, and I had no idea what to do next. This is my story. Or at least, this is the part of the story where I am right now. It is confusing and it is scary, but it is also more beautiful and more real than I ever could have imagined. I know that I can't be the only person who has ever felt this way. I can't be the only one who has felt invisible in their own life. If any part of my story felt familiar to you, if you have ever felt that deep ache and that yearning for a change you couldn't quite name, I would be so humbled if you would share a small piece of your own story in the comments. Reading your stories helps all of us know that we are not alone in these feelings. And if you want to follow along with me on this journey and see what happens next, please consider subscribing to the channel. It truly means the world to me. At 46 years old, I honestly thought my story was over. I thought the ink was dry and the book was closed. I thought the best I could hope for was a quiet, comfortable, and predictable ending. But I am learning that life doesn't move in a straight line. Sometimes the most unexpected people walk into your life. They see that your book is not finished. They hand you a new pen and a blank page, and they give you permission to start writing again, to start a new chapter. I have no idea what the future holds for me. I don't know how the conversation with Henry will go when he gets home. I don't know where this new path I am on will lead. But for the first time in a very, very long time, I am not afraid of the unknown. I am excited to turn the page and see what is written there, because I am not a ghost anymore. I am here. I am Ava, and my story is just beginning.